What is freedom of speech? How do the people of Malaysia practice it? Is it wrong to give your opinions against your government? In today's video, we'll be looking at two past events that correlates to it. Under the Universal Declarations of Human Rights and International Human Rights Laws by the United Nations, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion expressions. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interferences or to seek, receive, and impact information and ideas through any source of medium. But how does it apply to us Malaysians?
Freedom of speech is closely related to freedom of association and freedom of assembly. You have the right to gather a group of supporters and peacefully protest. Freedom of speech is essential to an open and fair society where human rights are protected. Many countries have constitutions that refer to the value of free speech. Yet, many governments around the world limit free speech rights. They silence their critics, journalists, activists, and ordinary people by putting them in prison or worse. We can see this in the widespread crackdowns on peaceful protests and the media all over the world. Governments have an obligation to protect freedom of speech. Speech can only be restricted when it harms the rights or reputations of others or threatens national security or public safety. Restrictions cannot exceed the threat.
Free speech is far from free. Commonly known as civil discourse or the open exchange of ideas, freedom of speech comes at the cost of valuing the right to express one's opinions without the fear of censorship or restraint. With the evolution of the digital age, freedom of speech becomes more controversial as new means of communication and restrictions arise. Freedom of speech is a cherished idea around much of the world, considered to be a basic human right that millions have fought and died for. But now we may be in danger of losing it. And this right isn't being taken away by an oppressive external enemy, but by an electronic generation who value political correctness and subjectivity over freedom of speech. In institutions across the globe, words are being banned. Here is a list of banned words on actual college campuses. Universities are now coming out with speech guides to create an atmosphere where no one can be offended and all words and phrases are politically correct. Ironically, the term politically correct is on there too. Some words and phrases have been banned completely, while many more words have been labeled problematic. Freedom of expression, even more so than speech, is a fundamental human right that reinforces all other human rights. However, free speech does not mean giving bigots a free pass. It includes the right and moral imperative to challenge, oppose, and protest bigoted views. And as history has shown, bad ideas are most often defeated by good ideas, backed up by ethics and reason, rather than by bans and censorship. A free society depends on exchanging new ideas, regardless of their potential capability of offending someone. Many of the most important, profound ideas in human history, such as those of Galileo Galilei and Charles Darwin, caused great religious offense in their time. The scientific revolution and the Enlightenment alone were turbulent periods of upending our traditional perspectives of religion, including our place in the universe. Astronomer Nicholas Copernicus faced fierce resistance from the Catholic authority when he discovered the Earth revolves around the Sun. Without that open exchange of ideas, our current understanding of the world would be unrecognizable and entirely false. Everything we know about the world, from the age of our species to the laws that govern energy, has come into being first by free speech, nurtured by the innovation of ideas, and curated into our collective knowledge if deemed worthwhile after withstanding the test of time. But free speech or hate speech should never come at the expense of human life. While we are constantly haunted by the memory of violence and its potential, we must not be fearful slaves to safe spaces. Great ideas can never thrive in a vacuum. Freedom of speech is what both makes up and defines our social contract, enabling people of radically different opinions to live together without violence, usually. Words matter. Some words hurt. But we know this about free speech. Discourse is all we ever truly have control of. So let's never be afraid to talk about, well, anything.
The First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech. But does that mean we're allowed to say anything we want? Well, not quite. The limits on free speech come from the basic principle that you're not allowed to harm others to get what you want. You can win in the marketplace with better goods and lower prices, and even put your competition out of business. But you're not allowed to use speech to threaten to hurt someone, either verbally or non-verbally. And you're not allowed to deceive people to get what you want. That's called fraud. You'd be harming them because they're relying on false information. Free speech means you can proclaim your beliefs and passions, argue your opinions, and speak out against what you consider to be injustices. As long as you don't defame or abuse people, or advocate the immediate use of force, or intentionally misrepresent the truth to people, you have the freedom to share whatever is on your mind.
So what kind of law aligns with freedom of speech? According to the Malaysian Federal Constitution, that would be Article 10, which is freedom of speech, assembly, and association. Article 10 carries 4 clauses, the first one being the basic foundation and subject to clause 2, 3, and 4. The paragraphs are A. Every citizen has the right to freedom of speech and expression. B. All citizens have the right to assemble peacefully and without arms. And C. All citizens have the right to form associations. These laws are protected under the Constitution. Clause 2 is where the law is imposed by the Parliament. The third clause are restrictions made when forming associations conferred by paragraph C of Clause 1, which may be imposed by any law relating to labor or education. The fourth clause is imposing restrictions for the Federation or any part thereof, or public order safety under Clause 2, paragraph A. The Parliament may pass laws prohibiting these subjects.
Communication is a fundamental feature of humanity. We communicate to share information, ask questions, create bonds with each other, build relationships, but most importantly, to express ourselves, our wants, and needs. The ability to express our opinion and speak freely is essential to bring out change in society. The United Nations even stated that freedom of expression is a fundamental human right, enshrined in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Federal Constitution of Malaysia, Article 10, guarantees all Malaysian citizens have the right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of association. However, the Constitution clearly stated that the Parliament has the right to impose restrictions on Article 10, such as the Defamation Act 1957, Sedition Act 1948, the Printing Presses and Publications Act 1984, Internal Security Act, and Police Act 1967. These restrictive laws are said to be essential for political stability, racial harmony, and economic prosperity. These are some of the subjects that are being said to be sensitive and to not be questioned. The Malay language as the official language, Islam as the national religion, the special position of Bumiputras, the sovereignty of rulers. There are many instances where Malaysian freedom of speech is being restricted under the banner of comprehensive security. In 2019, on his blog post, Rama Ramanathan cited witness accounts of how the sister of activist Jufazli Syed Ahmad might have prevented Jufazli from becoming the latest victim of enforced disappearance. It was an opinion piece, but he was investigated under Section 504 of the Penal Code and Section 233 of the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission Act, which deal with intentional insult and the improper use of network facilities. In May 2020, Shamsul Baring Ismail, a business person, was charged over remarks he allegedly made on social media criticizing the government's prosecution of those violating the quarantine orders. He is charged for making and spreading statements that are conducive to public mischief. In the most recent case is on Tashni Sukumaran, a journalist who wrote an article on 1st of May about the arrest of hundreds of migrant workers and refugees in Kuala Lumpur's so-called COVID-19 red zones with a higher infection risk. Later on, she was called to the police station and is now facing a possible 2-year jail sentence on a charge of insult with intent to provoke a breach of peace. According to the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia in 2003, it is clear in Malaysia that the balance between national security and human rights, including freedom of speech and expressions, is disproportionately weighed in favor of national security. The right to articulate one's opinions without fear of retaliation, censorship, or punishment is the epitome of democracy. Malaysians should know that their voices matter and should speak up against any institutional wrongdoings. Exercising our freedom of speech and expression also means being open and accepting to different views, which can lead to an open and fair society where voices of a common humanity, mutual respect, tolerance, and inclusivity
In a nutshell, freedom of speech and expression does exist in Malaysia today, but the freedom given is not absolute. It is impossible to deny that freedom of speech and expression is one of the most vital criteria in the foundations of a democratic society. Too much of freedom might cause unexpected cases to happen, such as the racial riots on 13 May 1969. Living in such a multiracial society, the racial and languages issue should be taken note of carefully, as they might offend or hurt others' feelings. Moreover, the dissatisfactions of other ethnicities in our country will stir up and might cause another race riot in Malaysia again if there is too much of freedom of speech and the expressions in discussing those issues. Besides, the government plays a major role in upholding the law without abusing it. Everyone has the same rights to do whatever they want as long as they follow the laws stated in the federal constitution. Overall, we are here together as Malaysians, and we should promote peace among our ethnicities from discrimination.